Welcome to the Explorers Podcast with Ken Boa. Here, Ken connects with friends and peers to discuss issues in the world and practices to improve one's biblical perspective.
Welcome to Explorers. I'm Ken Boa, and I'm with my guest, Guillermo Gonzalez. And Guillermo and I both share a lifetime love of astronomy. And we were talking about this just a moment ago, where my own love for these things was stimulated by a book that I read when I was 14. But welcome, though, to our time together.
Thanks, Ken. I'm happy to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you. When I was 14 years old, I was given this book that came out, LaRousse Encyclopedia of Astronomy. It was a massive piece of work. And I'm just looking at some of the old photographs and things of this nature, and it was kind of cutting edge at the time. And the idea of what the moon would be like, and Mars, and so forth. And it was quite an extraordinary experience for me, because it created a real love for the subject. So this images of the moon and things of this sort like that. So it was a massive undertaking for me as a boy to go through this thing, but it stimulated such a love for the topic. I had my own telescope and began to explore things. I still remember my first look at the Ring Nebula in Lyra, and some of these extraordinary things that I'd never seen before, but seeing them through a telescope, and having moments as well of a sense of wonder, a sense of awe, a sense of almost a kind of a terror, as it were, when I came to realize I'm not looking up. I'm looking down. There's no up and down, and that I'm surrounded in this sea of mystery. And those were ineffable experiences that created in me a kind of a longing for something that would be rich and profound. But that's what stimulated my going to Case Institute of Technology, which at that time was called that. Later became Western Reserve University, but to study astronomy. So we have a little bit of similarity in our my early background.
I didn't realize you went to Case Western. Did you know Earl Luck?
No, I don't think I did. No.
Okay, he was an astronomer there at Case Western. Just wondering.
I may have been there earlier than him. I was there. I'm an old guy.
Well, I think we share some history, because I grew up also loving astronomy. I grew up in a large light polluted city, Miami, Florida. But nevertheless, there was still enough visibility of the stars, especially when I was growing up. It wasn't quite as populated as it is now. I was fascinated. I probably got my first small refracting telescope for Christmas when I was around, I don't know, 7 or 8 years old. And even that little tiny thing, I was fascinated to look at the stars, and like you, I felt an awe and a wonder, and my love for science, especially astronomy, started at that early age. And also I felt strongly there was something behind this. This stimulated a response on my part of a strong belief that there had to be a mind behind all this, and it was. So I think we share a very similar experiences. I then went on and became an amateur astronomer. Started with astrophotography early on, taking pictures of the planets, the sun, the moon. Built an observatory in my backyard with my dad's help. Roll-off roof with an 8-inch f7 Newtonian. I got used. And then I eventually a Celestron 8. That was a bit more portable.
Yes.
But then I went on and got undergraduate degrees in astronomy and physics, and eventually a Ph.D. in astronomy. And so I feel really blessed that I was able to pursue my lifelong passion in astronomy. And ever since then, I've always had this same this kind of belief or idea that I had a fascination for science, a love for science, and a belief that there had to be a God behind all this, a mind. And those were kind of parallel tracks on my life, each supporting the other, you might say.
Yes. So they reciprocally interacted. Did you ever have a time of doubt or wondering because of the narrative that is the materialistic narrative?
Certainly through college, it was probably the years where I had the most doubt.
Yeah.
I went to a secular University of Arizona in Tucson. Tucson being the astronomy capital of the world.
What a wonderful place for the sky. Yeah.
That's right.
I mean, I was out there speaking and I was just absolutely astonished by what I saw. And I was at a conference and it was interesting because it was a Christian conference, FCCI, but I noticed nobody ever was looking at the night sky. It was, no one ever went out to behold the wonder that was there.
So I think this fascination with the night sky, with the starry heavens, is something, of course, that's been not just a few people experience. I think many people experience this, and of course you have David writing in the Psalms 19:1 that the heavens declare the glory of God, and so it goes on back to ancient times and other cultures, not just Jewish Christian cultures, but pagan cultures. With Aristotle in particular, and the Stoics, also saying that just the beauty and the wonder and the grandeur of nature and the heavens in particular point beyond themselves.
Yes.
And of course, as pagans, they believed in many gods, but they believed it pointed to deity, basically.
Yes.
So it's a universal experience throughout history that people have had this response to seeing the starry heavens. Unfortunately, today with bright lights in cities, fewer people are experiencing that.
Yes.
But I think at least when people go out to the country and camping and such things, they can experience it for at least for a little while.
No, that makes good sense. I have found that one antidote for humility, for the arrogance that sometimes comes upon us, when you want to get a better perspective of your orientation in this world, a good way to do that is to spend 20 minutes looking up at the sky from a hammock or something like that on a bright starry night in a area that's not light polluted, and that'll get you rather humble in a short order of time. Have you noticed that?
Yes, I don't think I've met anybody who, after looking up at the night sky on a clear, very dark location, moonless night, I don't think I've met anybody who just shrugs their shoulders and says, "So what?" No, they're all enthralled. Even atheists, feel attracted to this. There's some kind of response in them, like Neil deGrasse Tyson, atheist astronomer, and others have expressed the wonder, even the beauty in nature. And it's the starry sky is probably one of the most obvious aspects of that is the beauty of nature and the grandeur. There are others, of course, where people universally would say, "Oh, that's beautiful."
Yes,
looking out at nature.
Yes, we're creating this exploring, encountering beauty app now. It's kind of a platform for both a mobile and a desktop platform with 288 journeys, and we've looked at the microcosm, the midicosm, the biosphere, and then the macrocosm, and considering we've broken into 12 categories and then breaking into 24 journeys within each of them. So what I'm wanting to do with that app is to draw people back to a greater acuity of appreciation and an imagination of the glory of the wonders that they behold that transcend their grasp. I can't even understand if I remember grabbing a hibiscus just the other day, and just now today I was looking at this daylily and just feeling the texture and this, looking at the anther on it and the beautiful structure of this, and realize I can't even understand this flower, let alone an insect, let alone a bird, and so forth. And so, am I going to understand the mind of God?
That's right. Young people in particular are drawn to, they have such a curiosity about the world around them, and they're drawn to study things like this, flowers and insects. And looking at the stars and so on. I think it's something that has to be kind of forced out of them, or when they go to college, and
Yeah.
but they're naturally born with this curiosity and this
I think
wonder.
that's right. I think they have that fundamental curiosity that somehow is lost often when we gain a sense of critical realism, or so we suppose. We put away childish things, and I understand that. And Paul talks about putting away childish things, but I think there's a second naivete, Guillermo, that is what's called the second naivete, or the childlikeness, going from childishness to childlikeness. And in that respect, one becomes more curious, not less, and becomes supple and fluid and amazed and astonished by beauty that they hadn't even noticed before, and they begin to create a kind of an acuity. I'm seeking to amplify people's apprehension of God by means of the beauty of the created order. Even though fallen, it redounds, and we're immersed in splendor and wonder. Is that something you're trying to get people to do more?
Yes. And in fact, I just wrote a book for children, for young adults, called "The Farm at the Center of the Universe." And it doesn't promote geocentrism; it has nothing to do with that. The book really follows a 13-year-old boy as he spends a week at his grandpa's farm in Iowa, and his grandpa teaches him different things from the book of nature, one page at a time. That book of nature being the world around us, and looking through a microscope, looking through a telescope, examining different kinds of rocks and what they teach us, and so on. And so it's a book that's meant to encourage youngsters to have this wonder about the world around them again, and look at the world with new eyes, and learn how to read this grand book, and think of it as a book that's teaching us something, teaching us lessons. And
No, that's exactly right. That to me is a way of seeing a vision of the greatness of the created order. And when you think about Jodie Foster, remember that the film that came out, with Contact. And you remember the argument that was used in that? I want you to address yourself to that, because that was the fundamental argument that said, what a waste of space.
Oh, yes.
Yes. Remember that notion that and they were using the Drake equation at that time. Remember when they were only about 20 components that could qualify. So the illusion that would be that it would be populated by vast numbers of these.
Yeah. How could the universe be so vast and not
be
empty, and not have other life out there?
Right.
And it's also, so even if we are the only inhabited planet, it could be the case. If the designer and creator of the universe is God, and the concept of waste really has no meaning there.
No.
So it's not even a relevant argument or criticism. If it's God that we're talking about, waste is not relevant. And of course, we don't know all the purposes of the creation from a theological perspective. We might know a couple of them, but we don't know all God's purposes. And if He wanted to make a universe with only one inhabited planet, that's not wasteful, and it's part of His purposes. But I also wrote another book called The Privileged Planet, in which I explore the physical sciences, in particular in astronomy and cosmology, and show how our place in the universe is particularly well suited to learn about the universe around us, to learn in all the scientific fields. It seems to be optimal. And I think of the universe around us as an arena for discovery.
Yes,
that's one of the purposes of the universe. So God created this vast universe, with this tiny Earth in it, for us to discover its vastness and the power behind the cause that must have created it, and also to learn that it had even a beginning.
Yes, that's how I first learned about you.
Has to have a beginner.
It has to have a beginning, and it has to have a beginner, because it has to be infinite and eternal. to be the one who is the wellspring of all that is matter, energy, science, matter, energy, and space and time. That whole thing, he had to speak it into being, but he cannot be a part of the created order. He has to transcend that. So those implications. But I that's how I first learned about you, was from the reading The Privileged Planet, you and Jay Richards, and I have used your book a lot in that respect, and just this mindset of seeing that it took something this vast, something this impressive, this complex and rich, for us to even have this conversation.
Right. And I mean, science, the fact that we have science, there's so much that has to go right. I mean, just we were talking about the starry night sky, the starry heavens. It doesn't take much for us not to be able to see those stars, to have nights. We have to have a planet that rotates so that we have days and nights. We have to be in a planetary system with not too many other very close planets or moons, or in particular a multiple star system where we would have perpetually bright skies. We have to have an atmosphere that's at least partly cloudy to clear. We can't be living on a completely cloud covered planet like Venus, or the giant planets, or the moon Titan. And so there's a lot really that has to go right. We have to be around, or there has to be stars sufficiently close to us and sufficiently bright that we can actually see them with our unaided eyes. So a great deal has to go right.
A great deal has to go right. And you mentioned the galactic habitable zone as well, and then the idea as well as of being not though in that gas, and so that you're able to see through it. You're able to, so as you say, a privileged place to be able to observe the cosmos. It's more than just a chance collocation of random components, but so many things work together in concert.
That's right. To give us the best overall platform for making discoveries in the nearby and distant universe. That's right.
How many of these fine-tuning parameters would you now list if you were to kind of do a guesstimate of them?
I haven't tried to list them. And then you have to separate them. You have to separate, of course, what I call local fine-tuning, which are the particular parameters of a planet.
Yes.
Its orbit around the star orbits, where the star is in the galaxy, what kind of galaxy you orbit, and so on. Those are what I call local parameters, because we know they can vary. There are different kinds of stars, different kinds of planets. And then there are the cosmological parameters, the physical constants. It's like the masses of the fundamental particles, the quarks, the electron, the strengths of the fundamental forces, the initial conditions, how fast the universe started off expanding, the initial entropy of the universe, and then even the very forms of the laws themselves. So I like to separate those two different categories of the physical laws and constants and initial conditions versus the local parameters. And, as far as the local parameters go, there's probably, I don't know, it's hard to put a number on it, but of important ones, 2 to 3 dozen of important parameters, like the mass of the Earth, the composition of the crust, the thickness of the atmosphere, the distance from the sun, the kind of star we orbit. It has to be a main sequence star that's roughly one solar mass, the place in the galaxy, and so on. So all those local parameters, I'd say, it's hard to put a number, but 2 to 3 dozen. And then for the physical constants, there's something like, in terms of the total number of constants, I heard a number not too long ago. It's something on the order of 25 or so, 26. And several of those require fine-tuning. Cosmological constant, the masses of the quarks.
Yes.
The strengths of the 4 fundamental forces, all those need to be fine-tuned. And some of them are quite impressive, like the initial entropy and the cosmological constant value. Yeah, and an expert in that area, that I would recommend is Luke Barnes, who's written a book with his co-author Geraint Lewis, who's an atheist. It was a great collaboration. Luke Barnes being a Christian, Geraint an atheist, and they wrote a book on the fine tuning of the physical constants and the initial conditions of the universe.
Did they have a dialogue about the implications of those constants?
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they have later towards the end of the book.
Yeah,
they get into the implications and does it imply a designer? And so, of course, Luke Barnes thinks it does, and but they had a friendly dialogue exchange in the book. It's a really a fun read.
The whole area as well of math being a fundamental part of nature rather than just something humans came up with seems to be an intriguing growing issue as well. The dynamics of the fractal systems and so forth, the Mandelbrot and all these other components that we can see and all kinds of aspects of wonder that you see. The more and then there's been a debate as to whether some of these things were actually just imposed upon it or whether we are discovering that. And
that's the debate, between the two sides. Do we discover it or do we invent it? And I'm not a philosopher, so my opinions on this are not very valuable, but I just in the physical sciences, I know that there's been writings, people saying how it's kind of remarkable how the world is very mathematical. And Eugene Wigner in particular remarked how there's the unreasonable effectiveness of mathematics in the physical sciences back around 1960. And it just seems that you develop these mathematical models and so they seem to often have an application in nature that's very direct, and that's kind of surprising. And how the simplicity of the laws, like the law of gravity, 1 over r squared law, made it easy to discover and easy to parameterize. And the important laws tend to be rather simple. Follow simple dependencies or relations. And that was something that Robin Collins has written about, philosopher at Messiah College, how the laws, the mathematics of the physical laws themselves, the way they are, is helped, and they're just us discovering them.
Yes, there's a kind of an elegance to that. I was reading Jonathan Witt on the periodic table of the elements, for example, and just the progressive development where each insight led to another insight, and it was almost as if there was hints that were there provided for us, and once we got that hint, we were ready for the next one. And it was almost like journeying down and down and down until we realized we're not just looking at a pattern, we're looking at a symphony.
That's right. It's like if somebody's kind of a patient teacher and he's giving a simple example to start off with, and then he's giving us more challenging examples later on as we learn those first levels.
That's right.
And if just with the law of gravity, start off with Kepler coming up with his 3 laws of planetary motion.
Right.
The most complex of which is the third one, that the square of the orbital period is proportional to the cube of the mean distance from the sun. And then Newton showed, hey, I can, using my law of gravity and laws of motion, I can confirm that third law of Kepler. And then Einstein came along and said, well, we need to reconceptualize gravity. It's not really Newtonian, but we can tell there's a difference in high gravity situations, and so he came up with yet another conceptualization of gravity. But of course, for Einstein to do his reconceptualization, he needed the easier Newton's version before him to get going on his general theory of relativity.
Yes, and it appears that each time we discover something new, it raises new questions we weren't able to ask before. And so it's not as if we're now solving all the problems, but actually learning enough to know how little we know. And it becomes actually an exercise in what I would call epistemic humility, that the best scholars are the ones who seem to know how little they know.
Yeah, that's true. Right. And each step along the way, as I discussed in The Privileged Planet, our solar system and our universe has
Yes.
accommodated us to discovering these laws,
It-
especially
yes.
gravity with the solar system. I call it
Yes.
a planetary playpen
That's a
for
nice way to put it.
scientists.
Planetary playpen. Did you use
Yeah.
that in your book?
Yes.
The farm at the center of the universe. I like that. A planetary playpen. But it seems to me, though, that we're looking at, again, what's often described as inference to the best explanation, the idea of
Yeah.
abduction. And
Yeah.
the idea of a turtle on a fence post. There aren't many options that you have there. And what would be the best inference that one
That's
would
right.
draw?
It probably didn't climb up on that
No, not
fence
likely.
post.
And there probably wasn't a gust of wind that blew it up there either.
I should have used that example in my children's book. Instead, I used a somewhat more violent example to discuss inference, the best explanation of detective finding somebody in a room who had been stabbed in the back. So,
Yeah,
is the best explanation an accident or suicide
yeah,
or
that
somebody
works.
murdered
Yeah,
him?
yeah, that's more dramatic, but
It
it
is.
works. But that's what you're doing. You're kind of doing a cosmic sleuthing, and it's a sort of a thing that if a person likes mystery, and I wouldn't be surprised that you like good
Mhm.
mysteries, because
Yeah,
we're dealing with mysteries and we're dealing with a solution, elegant solutions sometimes that come out of these complex possibilities.
that's right. Because we're looking at nature around us as a kind of artifact. The whole thing is like a giant artifact with many parts. And we want to try to figure out where did all this come from?
Yeah.
What caused it? And we got to put all the clues together.
Yeah. What are your thoughts then as you anticipate as a follower of Jesus then and the biblical vision of a fourth act that's going to be coming after we had the creation, then the fall,
Mhm.
then redemption, and now we anticipate
The new
a kind of
creation.
a new order of creation, as it
Yeah.
were, new realities, new realms of an
Mm.
unfallen world. And if this
Mm.
fallen world is so elegant and wonderful and as splendid as it is, we wonder, do you ever do a
Yeah.
lot of thought experiments or
I've
imagine?
thought
I
about
find,
this a little bit.
yeah,
So, not a lot, but so for example, as I mentioned, David writes in Psalm 19 about the beauty of the heavens.
yes,
So we live in a fallen world, but I think the stars and the galaxies and the planets and everything that we can see out in the night sky and through telescopes, I think is part of God's plan to reveal His glory. And so I think that's a good aspect of creation. Certainly, the beauty in nature are good aspects of creation, which were originally intended and largely unfallen. And
yes,
so I think in the new creation there will be
yes,
beauty, greater beauty, but
yes,
there will be stars and galaxies and
yes,
planets still.
yes,
Uh, uh, why would God remove those things which are beautiful and point to Him in the
yes,
current creation? And
yeah,
so I think there will be, we can see stars at night and such in the new creation. In fact, uh, this is now speculating. People may wonder, why are all these other planets? Why are they there around other stars? Well, I think one possibility is they're there for us. We
yes,
will
yes,
go to
yes.
them in the
That's
new
what I
creation. We
see.
will explore them.
Yeah, I think we agree on that. I've been doing more thinking about that. I've actually made
Mhm.
appointments with people for 1,000 years from now
Ah,
to visit certain things. We saw this particular Hubble Deep Field, and we've
mm,
selected a galaxy. That's sort of a thing, though. But
yeah.
it's a fascinating idea to be in a resurrected body with
Mm,
greater capacity
mm,
than we now possess in a resurrected cosmos where the blast of the fall is overcome, where God removes disorder and entropy and replaces it with His actual energy to keep it sustaining so that it doesn't wear out and run down.
mm.
It's a kind of a very different vision. But I think our capacity to explore, I don't know whether we will be able to, but it seems to me that time and space, our experience of them, now that they won't be in a fallen cosmos,
Right,
perhaps serving us, almost like a
right.
kitten purring at our feet, where you can choose to be at a place and you're there, and
Yeah,
you can zoom down orders of magnitude and back up, and if it's not that, it'll be even better.
Well, there are hints of that, of course, in the New Testament with Jesus walking into a room through a wall.
There are
So
definitely hints. Yeah.
there are hints. So yeah, I don't know if maybe we'll be able to just travel to another star system just by
By
thinking it.
thinking
We
of it.
want to go there, or we could do it by building big ships and just take our time getting there because
Take
we'll
our
live a long
time.
time, right? So we can take 1,000 years to travel to the nearest
Yeah.
planet beyond
Yeah.
our solar system.
I think at any rate, we won't be disappointed. Let's just put it that way. And as the
Yeah.
older I get, the more I'm thinking about of actually leveraging what I know about this extraordinary world and the microcosm and all the wonders there and the biosphere and the macrocosm
It's
and
a rich
leveraging it.
universe.
Oh my word. And the more we see, I find that the more I see, the more I'm able to see. And
Mm,
what my desire would be for you people to use this as a force multiplier for awe, for worship, indeed for fear, a sense of a holy fear when sometimes you have a sense of what am I looking at?
mm.
And what is to come?
Yes, I think that's a good idea,
Yeah.
and I like that.
So I'm encouraging people to create a kind of an acuity for an aptitude for noticing what they often have overlooked
Yeah.
and not. And when we do that, I find it's been working for me very well the last few years because every spring is better than the one before. Because I'm able
Mm.
to see things in trees like the dendritic
Ah.
architecture of trees in the winter that I didn't see before.
Mm.
And every time I see it anew, I'm able to see, now I'm able to see something more. I see new patterns I wasn't able to see before. And I think that's a kind of a modality of worship that makes good
Mm.
sense.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
You know, Kepler thought he was thinking God's thoughts after him,
After him. Yeah.
and he was like when he was studying nature and doing his mathematical calculations, it was almost like he was a pastor giving a sermon.
That's it. Yes.
And
You're,
so, yeah,
they declare, they reveal, they exposit the glory of God in a palpable way. And so I see the book of nature, the world, as God's general revelation
mhm,
by which we go from the visible to the invisible. We go from the seen, and through that we look into the unseen. Whereas God's that's His world, but then His special revelation in the Word, we go from the unseen to the seen, and the infinite Word who made all things now becomes the incarnate Word. And so the word now, and then so that the word can become flesh and dwell among us. So
mhm,
it becomes the indwelling word. So um,
yeah,
I think that I like to think of it this way: the best is yet to come. We won't be bored.
right, right. No, that's certainly true. And it's too bad that there's this common vision that's portrayed in the media of heaven as just strumming in the clouds, strumming
Yes.
harps in the clouds.
Yeah.
It won't be like anything like that.
No, no, not
No.
not. That reminds me of a Gary Larson cartoon where there's a fellow who's got his heavenly kit. He's floating on a
Oh,
cloud. He's got his wings. Where they get the idea we're
uh,
going to have wings. He's got
right.
his harp and he's got his halo. And the caption though is he says, "Are there any magazines here?"
Yeah, it's so boring. It's just a
So
harp
boring.
in the clouds. Yes. Yeah.
That's a
What
yeah.
an inaccurate picture.
Most
Yeah.
people's idea of heaven is as a crashing bore, and
Yeah.
I know philosophers of religion have used that as an argument against immortality, which is a
Mm,
false notion because it reveals their lack of imagination that they can't begin to imagine. But I think that
yeah.
science and technology are working in profound ways in our time, and we're privileged to see it in such a way
Yeah.
that it's amplifying the glory of God, not
Yeah.
diminishing it.
Oh, yes. All these new instruments, from the electron microscope to giant space telescopes like the James
Yeah.
Webb and giant ground based telescopes, which are being built now even bigger every year. Uh, and in fact, we've learned how to beat the seeing is compensate for the turbulence in the Earth's atmosphere on some of these high mountaintop telescopes using various tricks, like deformable mirrors, and they can achieve resolution even better than the Hubble Space Telescope
Which is
resolution, even though it's in space.
That's quite incredible, isn't it? And that kind of technological prowess is really can be glorifying to God, or can just be elevating of human hubris. And so it depends on what we do with it. Yeah,
that's right. One or two tracks.
Yeah, those are tracks we have, and one leads toward him, the other one away from him. And so the whole idea of the mentality that we are our own gods.
And the more powerful we get with technology, the more dangerous it could be to go down the wrong track in coming years.
Yeah, kind of building the second Tower of Babel, as it seems to be upon us in a very profound way, a universal language, which nothing will be impossible for them to do.
Right. With artificial intelligence and robotics,
precisely.
We're going to try to make artificial beings in our own image.
Yes.
And we will be the gods, and they'll be our kind of slaves. And there are dangers ahead.
There are dangers.
Watch yourselves.
But we are embedded in a great story where in the fourth act, it all converges together and becomes doxological. Even time and space will be doxological, as I see it. Everything will be serving him, and everything will, because right now we are the rebels of the cosmos, but ultimately all will be well, and he will bring everything to a consummation. But I look forward to exploring these things together with you.
Thank you.
The ages to come.
Yes. And also looking forward to meeting you finally at the Museum of the Bible for our presentation on beauty and science in July.
It's going to be a great joy to do that. And I was delighted when at the last minute we were able to get Jay to join us as well. So
yes. He's a great thinker, and he'll bring very acute philosophical aspects and helping us sharpen our thinking on the objective nature of beauty.
That's right. So that is a beautiful thing. It's a wonderful thing for us to pursue. Because we are indeed aesthetic beings, because God's the wellspring of all beauty, and we are rational beings because God's the wellspring of all the truth. Right. And then we are moral beings because God's the source of all goodness. So that the beauty points to the truth of God, which points to the goodness, the Spirit to the Son to the Father. So it's a wonderful vision of this whole process of being connected with all of that.
Yeah,
invited into the story.
Yeah, and just to go back on one question I meant to talk a little bit about, you just kind of reminded me, with God creating certain qualities in us, and in particular creating us in his image and with rationality and the ability to reason, is one of the assumptions that led to the rise of science in Western Europe uniquely. And then, of course, it was exported to other countries. But, modern science really only arose once in human history and in one place. And that was Western Europe, and Christian theological principles underpinned that revolution. It's not really acknowledged enough. And
it's not. Yeah, but it needs to be, because there is a reason why it was, in fact, empirically based science would be founded upon a theistic understanding of a world in which we are bearers of that image, and therefore it's understandable. We can grasp it because we're image bearers. So to me, that provides the philosophical foundation for doing good science. And it was, as you say, nowhere before seen.
Right. Yeah, that's something I also touch upon in my children's book about that. And so it's a connection that I think youngsters in particular need to learn about, because they're certainly not getting that in our schools.
No.
Today, they're probably taught just the opposite.
Yeah. Well, I've really appreciated our time together, my friend, and I'm looking forward to getting to know you as a true friend when we meet together and break bread with one another.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. So the Lord bless you, and we will see you on July 13th.
Thank you for being a part of the Explorers Podcast. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.